Hey family, this is Reginald Kuankaru. I am here with Crystal Turner. She is the founder of Mentally Magnificent. And so we're going to talk today. I am highlighting again some of the members that are in KCL, and Crystal is going to be actually doing a circle within KCL, the new community that is going to be focused on mental health. So Crystal, tell me a little bit about yourself, or tell us a little bit about yourself and what you're doing.
Okay, thank you for having me, Reginald. Yes, my name is Crystal Turner, and I, in profession, work as a psychiatric nurse practitioner. And I've worked as a nurse for over 20 years, as a psychiatric nurse practitioner for roughly 5 years, working in a lot of Black communities and seeing treating a lot of people with a lot of mental health issues. And from that, I have wanted to expand around the concept of how we address mental health, just from my concerns that I've seen in our community.
Okay. So when you were talking about, and we're talking about what you're doing with Mentally Magnificent, what specifically, who are the people that you're helping with Mentally Magnificent?
Well, let me just say, Mentally Magnificent is a holistic company where I support people who've endured emotional childhood trauma to heal from those conditions. The way that I'm doing that is by utilizing traditional African principles as well as other natural remedies to help people heal from those circumstances. And from that, what I love and my mission is to see is for people to go from being a victim of their life to the creators of their world.
Okay, awesome. That sounds beautiful. What made you so passionate about what you're doing, and why you wanted to go this direction with helping people?
So I would say there are really three components when I think about it all. And first of all, I had my own issues growing up, so many different dynamics. So let me think about how I will guide this. So as a typical teenager, very typical, I had all the attitude. You know, my mom would try to talk to me and she could hardly say anything to me, mainly because I was dealing with my own levels of depression. I didn't know it at that time. But the first conversation that I had with my mom in those teenage years that really opened up so much dialogue was her sitting down us late at night one night, and she was watching TV and we were watching something, and we got on the conversation of her mom. And in that, she had let me know that her mom had schizophrenia, or she was diagnosed with schizophrenia, and throughout her childhood, her mom had been institutionalized, because that is what they did back in those days when people had these things that we state as mental health issues. She was institutionalized. But when she talked to me more about it, I found out that my grandmother had been raped when she was around 13. She lived in Arkansas, and a group of white men kidnapped her, raped her, did whatever they did. She was gone for weeks. And when she came back home, she was never the same. She just was never the same person. And so it started with that. My mom telling me about certain instances that my grandmother did to her that were very hurtful. And it really opened up. I mean, I think me being this really closed off, angry teenager toward my mom, we must have sat for 3 hours that night just talking. And it was just like the beginning of a connection. It was through this history in my family. And then I also had learned about my mom and my dad's past. They both experienced pretty traumatic issues in their family growing up. My mom having dealt with her mother being institutionalized, and my dad having had a father who was abusive. He was a sharecropper. He was abusive to his mom, my dad's mom, and she ended up passing away at the hands of him. And it was another dynamic that my dad never spoke to us about. I never knew this from my father, but I could see both in my mom and my dad the pain that they carried throughout me growing up that had not been dealt with. And then for myself, I dealt with a lot of bullying growing up as a kid, and I had my own attempt on suicide as a teenager because of that. As I came into So these are the things that made me want to have interest in mental health. I also had a friend who developed schizophrenia right before me, and I didn't know that that's what it was. So when I found out that's what it was, it really spoke to me on the lack of understanding about mental health, and it made me want to understand more, so that I could have an awareness if someone was going through something. As I began to work as a nurse practitioner in our communities, I saw so many people who had been diagnosed with schizophrenia or bipolar disorder or other issues, high levels of anxiety. And when I've gotten their history, what was very common is many of them had some form of trauma in their childhood that had never been addressed in the communities that we grew up in or the households that we grew up in. So I think these are the things that made me realize that a lot of times, especially for the people that I was treating, we were treating with medicine. Medicine wasn't always dealing with all of the issues. It definitely wasn't solving the issues. So I want to expand on how can we be a part of our healing outside of medicine? What are some things that we're not doing currently in our life that could maybe bring some more stability to how we are being in our mental state?
Okay. So when you're thinking about this legacy really of trauma, what do you see as like is there an underlying issue why we're not getting help, why we're not dealing with this trauma? Do you see a pattern in that?
That's a really good question. I do. I feel like I think what happens commonly is, first of all, there's a lack of awareness of these issues that we tend to experience in our childhood and connecting it to this idea of how it can impact us in the long run for the remainder of our lives, and particularly when we become adults. I think that sometimes and oftentimes when we're raised in an environment, we kind of take on these patterns as being normal. So we don't even see it as an issue. Right. When we're in this environment that has now become our normal. A lot of times you don't even see the pattern or see something not being right until you go off to college and you're around other people who've had different experiences, or you're out of the environment. You're in your own adult life, maybe you have a partner, or you're now trying to raise your own kids, or you're navigating outside of those conditions that you were in, and you're seeing how limited you are in coping with certain life issues, common life issues.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's kind of like I'd like to use the analogy of like when we're not aware of what we're living in, it's kind of like a fish doesn't know that they're in water.
Yes.
And it's really, you like you say, until you are able to step outside of it and see it from, the outside, you have no idea that you're even dealing with trauma. And absolutely. I remember, like, even as a school teacher, a lot of teachers coming from, and I was, in the inner city, and I grew up in the inner city, so I knew the mindset of a lot of the kids. But a lot of the teachers that come from outside of that, they talk about how, oh man, these children must be having it so tough. They must be feeling, and on some level, you wake up in the morning and, you've gone through what you've gone through, but we don't know that we're having it tough. Those kids don't know that they're having it tough. They didn't know. I didn't realize I was in poverty until, years later. So yeah. It's a lot of times you just don't know what you don't know.
Absolutely.
So when you're thinking about, so you're saying earlier that you deal with this from African principles. Why do you think that that's important? And from the Kemetic principles, why do you think that that's even important?
Well, I think particularly in African-American communities or African communities, but also expanding to anyone else, because principles aren't just made specific for any race. I feel like there is a lot that has been extracted from our experience being here, and we've been given a different set of dynamics to function from.
Okay. I mean, that's right. Cool. When you say a lot has been extracted from our experience, what do you mean by that?
Our culture. I think that a lot of dynamics as it relates to our culture have been sort of demonized or looked at as being not valuable or lower level. And so I think in a lot of our mindsets already, when we hear anything African, it's like this, it's this negativity that's associated with it. But what I found is, as I've come to understand a lot about African history and culture, there's a lot of beauty in it. And I see that that can be very empowering. So as that pertains to the cultures and different beauties in the cultures, when we're able to, break away from this mindset that tries to teach us who we are here in the society that I'm in this Western world, to be able to connect back to African culture as well as principles is like a whole new world. It's like me starting over and relearning, but it's with excitement because as I learn, I grow in a different way than I was from this other mindset in Western or European concepts that I've been raised in.
Okay. And I think that, and I'm gonna kind of maybe bring this a little bit more specific here. When we're talking about especially family trauma, mental illness, especially within the African American communities, a lot of times we didn't even deal with it because it was from a religious perspective that God is the great healer, and that not even being and mental illness was not even addressed because it was looked at as it was demonic, that you were separated from God in some kind of way, that there was something that was wrong with you, and your lack of connection to God. So it wasn't even addressed. You didn't even want to, people didn't even want to bring that up. What do you see, any connection there, or how do you view that?
Oh, absolutely. When I did attend a Christian church, it was a Seventh-day Adventist church. And just some examples, there was a gentleman who would attend the church. He was clearly homeless and he had some mental illness because he was responding to internal stimuli, meaning he was talking to himself. He was hearing voices, it was clear, and he was talking and responding to that. And so people in the church knew him this way. And I don't know, I'm sure some people were loving. There are other people who were tolerating this person's presence. And I recall, first of all, I recall him being in the church during a sermon one day, and as the preacher was preaching, he started talking to himself, like he was responding more to these voices.
Hey, family. This is Reginald Kuakaru, founder of Kemetic Centered Living. I hope that you're enjoying this wonderful interview. It gets even better towards the end, but I just wanted to step in here and tell you about the new Kemetic Centered Living community. Is going to be based around education and classes and courses and content that basically helps a person get over negative religious programming. But it's also going to have a component of support. So looking at peer support from each other, coaching, different things. So because a lot of people talk about that they just feel so lonesome, or they feel like they're on this journey alone. And I want to create this community where there is positive people that are supporting each other. So if it's something that you think that you would be interested in, get on the wait list to be notified when the registration is open. And you can go to jointhekclfamily.com, and you can go there, put in your email address, and then when registration is open, then we can send you more information about the community. So hope to see you inside. Bye.
And somewhere in that, the pastor said, hold on. And he's like, whatever the gentleman's name is, he's like, you have to stop. And then, you all have to, take him out. And then his response was, the devil is busy. The devil is busy right now.
Was that the preacher's response?
Right. The preacher's response is the devil is busy. And I remember me coming from, I was still Christian at this point, but I was at this point that I was really navigating my belief system. And when I heard that, also coming from a background of working with people with mental illness, it really made me think like, wow, this person is struggling with their mental health, and he's hearing a pastor refer to him or some aspect of him as the devil. I just for me, I said, this is stigma, like magnified to the 10th power. And this person, though he might hear voices, he can also hear what this pastor is saying about him. You know what I mean? And how must that make him feel about who he is? You know, and the same situation in the same church, this same gentleman would come in and people would be upset about the way he smelled. And for me, it's just like, we're in this place and we're supposed to be in our spirit in this loving space. And it seems that your way of responding to people dealing with this is sometimes worse than people when they're not in the space. So it was really opened my eyes to this lack of awareness that is there in the church, and the other thing that I do know about many people, not all, but there are many people who are dealing with certain types of psychosis where they get religiously preoccupied. You know, they'll really talk about.
What do you mean by that? Give me an example.
They really get focused on religion, and their voices, maybe they'll start to feel like it's Jesus talking to them, for example, or Jesus told me that I am to do this thing, things that I would know could be dangerous, you know, but they're so connected now to this idea that Jesus told them this, or maybe they are Jesus, or they get very focused and zoomed. I think they misinterpret even what these scriptures are saying, and they relate, it somehow gets enmeshed in the psychosis of the way that they're thinking. And they really, sometimes it's even more difficult. I've had people who say, you know, God told me not to eat anything else. I'm not to eat anything, you know, and it all gets kind of entangled in the religion. The psychosis of the religion kind of get enmeshed. So
can you tell me what when you say psychosis, what do you mean by that?
Okay, I'm sorry. So psychosis is certain conditions that people are dealing with. So it's when a person is hearing voices or they're not connected to reality per se. Maybe they're
disconnected from.
Yes. Yeah. And that could be by them hearing voices, you know, like having hallucinations of voices, having hallucinations of seeing things that other people are not seeing. It could be delusional where they're thinking that there's something that is not really realistic. Maybe they're saying, you know, I am Jesus, or I am able to jump off this building and fly. You know, it could be things that could be dangerous to them, but they're seeing it as reality.
Got you. Okay. And there's difference. So when we're talking about a psychosis, there's different levels of this, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes, definitely. There are people who hear voices. I think about the movie A Beautiful Mind, where I forget the main actor's name, but Russell Crowe. At first, he was tormented by these voices that he was having and these hallucinations, the visual and the auditory. He was hearing them and seeing them, and he was tormented by it. At some point, he was able to get to the point where he was able to recognize the voices from what was real life, you know, and I don't want to take away their experience because that is part of their experience, but what's happening in this physical world and what they're experiencing from their mind. And so there are people who deal with these levels of psychosis. Some people can recognize that they can come and they can say, okay, I know that these are the voices, you know, or the voices are more quiet, or the voices aren't there anymore. And then there are some people where it's so much they can't decipher the voices from me talking to them. They can't tell what's reality and what's not anymore. Gotcha.
Right. Now, on some level, and I'm trying to ask this in a way, when we're talking about them dealing with the psychosis, okay, and how, and I'm thinking in the context of when we're dealing with it from the Christian perspective and how we are taught to look at ourselves. And then when we're dealing with it from the Kemetic perspective and how we're taught to look at ourselves. So I'm a sinner, I'm wicked, I'm blah, 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 to I'm divine. How do you see that what you're doing could be helpful to helping a person transitioning from the trauma, from whatever trauma that they're dealing with?
That's a really good point. And I haven't dealt with anyone who has because there are different reasons that people hear voices, but I haven't dealt with that specifically.
And not necessarily just hearing voices. I'm
Okay.
just saying. So when we're talking about, because they're obviously hearing the voices, that's some kind of trauma that they're having, that they're dealing with.
Mm-hmm.
So even familial trauma, that they're dealing with. So I know that a lot of times the perception that we have of ourselves, it can exacerbate the problem, or it can help you to help alleviate or help you overcome the problem. So that's what I'm saying. In that context, how do you see the difference in dealing with it from our traditional Christian way, and then now looking at it from the African or Kemetic perspective?
Well, I would oppose that based on, I would say, from my own how it's helped me personally.
Okay.
I've dealt with depression and anxiety, and definitely when I've thought of it from a Christian standpoint, or even just like this cultural standpoint, it's everything is externalized for me to be able to have this level of reassurance or value of who I am. It's been externalized, even in the idea that how God outside of me sees me as being valuable, or performing in the way I choose to be, let's just say in a church, to get acceptance. If I'm doing all the things that I'm supposed to do based on that religion, then I get more acceptance and I'm valued more. And also the idea that, there's something external from me that I need to reach out to more to help to give me this level of peace or this knowing about who I am. When I think about going to more Kemetic, traditional African principles, I think about the proverb, know thyself. And as I've come to know that proverb more, it's helped me to understand that there's a going within to learn who I am, and to get the real validation from that source that's within me. If we understand that the kingdom of God is within, then that's where I'm more trusting to go first, to understand who I am. And when it talks about knowing that self, and it's understanding what are the things that have occurred that have brought you pain, and now what are the stories you're telling yourself based off of these things that have happened, and then now based off of what I'm telling myself and I'm holding inside, it is really impacting what I'm experiencing on the outside, because all of that's experience is contributing to how I feel as a person. Just how I feel in my beingness is based off of these things from the past, and how I've packaged it in my mind to sum up who I am. And I've come to understand that what I'm holding inside, and those feelings that I'm holding, if they're not so great, I've continued in my life to get those experiences repeated to me in different scenarios, many different scenarios, but at the end of the day, the same story is being relayed back to me. And so when I've come to know myself and understand, first of all, I really tried to connect to who I was and that essence of who I was before all of these maybe not so great things happened to me. I can remember that essence of that younger person, and understanding, okay, when these things happen, how did these events shape me? And now, what do I want to see myself to be? Who do I want to see myself to be? Disconnected from the things that have happened. Who did I see myself to be before that? And who do I desire to see myself to be now? And connecting to that is changing my experiences in life.
Okay.
So I think when people have dealt with a lot of trauma from their childhood, that's the big thing, is there's a story that they have connected with themselves based off of those things that have happened. And there's so many different things that happen to people. And so there's so many.
Yeah. And I want you to, so let's go to something, make this like real for a person. What is something that is traumatic? They might have dealt with trauma from childhood that they bring into their adulthood. What is the trauma? So a trauma, and then how does it manifest in their adulthood? Okay.
Okay.
So what was the trauma that they had in the childhood that might manifest a certain way in adulthood that we might not even recognize?
Okay. Well, let me just say one thing about trauma first. There are these big T traumas and these little T traumas. The big T traumas are the things we expect generally that a person can be impacted by. Someone who's been in the military and they've seen a lot of killing or things like that, or you're literally stuck up at gunpoint and you think you're going to die, you think you're going to lose your life. You're in a natural disaster and you think you're going to lose your life. Those are traumas that can happen at any age, and obviously we understand why that's traumatic. But these little T traumas are not at the magnitude of that in the initial experience, but they can have as much of an impact. So these little T trauma are things that happen, usually they're repeated over time, they keep happening, and they also happen at a young age, or they occur when people are not expecting these things to occur, and it kind of like disrupts their natural flow that they were having. So an example of that could be someone who is bullied, for example. I was definitely bullied. If you're bullied, and this is like, bullying can come off as like shame or humiliation. Those are the undertones of it. And it's a constant.
That's what the person is feeling internally.
Yes, it's a constant exposure to the shame or humiliation or rejection. It's constant over a period of time. And what can happen to a person is that in childhood, obviously this doesn't feel good, and they're feeling that it doesn't feel good as a child. They can end up having more anxiety as a child in terms of being in those social settings where they have these experiences. But as this is happening, they are beginning to tell a story about themselves. They are beginning to have a perspective of themselves and of other people as they're growing. But as they become adults, oftentimes there can be this still, though you're not dealing with the bullying anymore per se of those people, as an adult, you might feel still the narrative of not being valuable or not being worthy. And then
so give me an example of so how would that, say, in a relationship, and we're talking about in a romantic relationship, how would that manifest that they might have those feelings of being unworthy or not feeling valuable?
Well, let me say it in a friendship. Let's just say someone wants to develop friendship, and they are very hesitant. They are very standoffish in pursuing friendships because they feel like they won't be accepted. They won't be embraced. They want to have the friendships. They want to have this community of people that they can trust, but the anxiety and the fear of re-experiencing humiliation or rejection is overwhelming, and it can cause a person to not take the steps to formulate these relationships, or they can have these relationships and maybe they have a disagreement with a friend. They can totally take that whole disagreement as some form of rejection of why they're not valuable, or this person doesn't really like them. This person doesn't really care for them. This person doesn't see them as being valuable. They could even see an argument that a person who's not dealt with any kind of trauma of this sort could see it as a disagreement. They can move past it. Whereas someone who's dealt with being in situations where they were humiliated a lot, they could see some aspect of that argument as this person trying to humiliate them, or this person trying to put them down. You know, that script is still running. So it's almost like you're hypersensitive to little things that might just stand out as huge to you.
Crystal, that when you're saying that, how people might deal with being humiliated from the past and how they might bring it to their future or to their present, that immediately took me to how Black people have been, our parents and us have been humiliated through racism. And how we might even deal with that in our relationships and bring that to our homes and bring that to our, and it's like just this, you know, like it makes me go like, wow.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's another level of trauma too, is the experiences that people have had it from a societal standpoint. The
Yeah.
message that you're constantly getting.
Yeah, and it's like we deal with these and just going back to your example, how a person might assume a certain thing from the trauma that they've dealt with from the bullying, and can't even connect and connect and make real relationships. And I know I've heard people like, and I get a lot, of people on the channel that might make comments and stuff, and you can just see the pain that they had dealt with, and I've had people talk about it, that they just don't even like want relationships, or they don't even, and they take this position of it's just who I am, and I don't even want relationships, and blah blah blah. But it's from pain.
Mm-hmm.
That it's coming through pain, and they have made this story up that they just don't need anybody, they don't want anybody, and they'd rather be alone.
And it's a defense mechanism. It's really
Yes.
that trauma with this defense mechanism that's not really, they feel it's working because it's immediately they're avoiding this experience again.
Yes.
But they're not fulfilled because they're dealing with loneliness. They do have this other desire deep down.
Yes.
But a lot of times when we're dealing with trauma, you're dealing with this one perspective. There could be 100 other possibilities, but the pain and the emotion that's still so connected to that experience causes you to just be in this one perspective, seeing things through this one lens, based off of your own pain that has happened.
Yeah, man, you're just locked in on that one perspective, and can't. I really think that it takes, and this is why I really like the Kemetic Principles, because when you are used to being locked in on that one perspective, with the Kemetic Principles, it gives you the tools, give you the ability to turn back in and go, wait a minute, let me see what this could be. What is happening here? Because there are questions that you can ask that will put you in a metacognitive state where you can think about how you're thinking.
Mm-hmm.
So that to me is one of the powerful things about the Kemetic Principles, is that from a Christian perspective, a lot of times, and I have to put it in context like that for me, because so many of us have dealt with things from a Christian perspective, we don't even think about how we think as Christians, or as Christians. But from a Christian perspective, we pray to Jesus or whatever, and ask help from Jesus, but we never look at ourselves.
Yeah, that's powerful.
We never look at what it is, what our perspective is, because I know that I've had family members. I mean, my mother has dealt with bipolar, and I've had an aunt that dealt with she was so focused in on her perspective. I mean, they would sick God on me, from their perspective,
They would sick God on you?
Sick God on me. They were like, God was going to get me, from their perspective.
Yes.
But there was an inability to look, because they felt like they were so righteous in their perspective. There was an inability of them even to look at themselves and see that something might be wrong.
Yeah. To be able to ask the question, to open things up to ask a question that can be the start of you having a more broader awareness of some things.
Yes. They would be so self-righteous in a sense that it's just that there was no conversation that you could have that they could even consider that maybe their perspective was off.
I think that's interesting, because when you put it that way, it does sort of teach you not to ask questions in any aspect, or to, even when it comes to wanting better for self, to ask like a interesting or a thought-provoking question that causes you to think beyond what you've been thinking already. Yeah. And I think that is really the start of being able to learn more, is you have to want to know more. to get more understanding than to be more expanded and to get more answers. And with the more answers, you could have more approaches on how things can be dealt with, for sure.
Yeah, yeah, and that again, it just the Kemetic principles can be so powerful because like the spotlight method that we use, that where we can, you know, start to recognize our own way of thinking and believing. You know, we can start to look at that. You know, that to me is such a powerful tool that you just don't get from where you were before. You know, from me, it was just from a Christian perspective. I never had any tools or anything like that mentally where I could actually start to diagnose myself in a way, you know?
Yeah, and I think I appreciate one of the principles when we talk about as within, so without. And so what you're holding on to emotionally is really your experience. And when I connect that to expanding perceptions of a thing, so a person's experienced this specific issue in their life that has traumatized them, and now their emotions and their view is strictly on that. But if they are willing to expand, understand that there are 1,000, more than 1,000, obviously, different ideas, not ideas. There are 1,000 different ways that a situation can go. You know, so yes, there was this one situation, and you connected to it this way. But there are 1,000 different ways that you could think about that. There are 1,000 things that you could focus in on outside of the things that are being focused on to give you a different experience. And by focusing on a different aspect, you could connect to different emotions and change the whole experience for yourself and heal from those experiences. But it does take, you know, expanding. When I think about that, expanding your thought, to ask questions, expanding your perceptions, to be able to see how other ways to look at a situation, and doing that so that it's what benefits you the most. You know, it's not benefiting me if I only see myself as being a victim to this specific situation. There's no benefit in that for me. I mean, I guess there can be, because sometimes we get connected to people feeling sorry for us in that victim role, but it's not empowering.
Right. The payoff is that the people feel sorry for you. It is, I don't look to that. It's not a benefit, but a payoff is having people go, "Oh, that's so terrible," you know? But you know, but from the Kemetic, again, just the principles of, you know, as within, so without, I think that that's very powerful as well, because it empowers you to say, first of all, I'm not a victim. And then the other part of that is, rather than looking at yourself as wicked or sinner or a wretch or whatever that negativity that you've been taught to believe about yourself, you look at yourself as I am an aspect of the divine, which makes me divine. You know, so you can at least have a perspective that I'm good. So just recognizing that I'm good, then you can look outside yourself and say, okay, well, what is this showing me about me that I might want to change? You know, what is this event that's happening, this trauma that's happening? What is it showing me that I might need to change? And that again is just it's a more empowering question, and it becomes a tool for introspection.
Absolutely. What can I learn about myself from this experience? And absolutely, that whole idea of that's what we hold inside, I'm a victim. There's another way of looking at that is, I am a survivor. When you think about, I mean, I'm sure this is not what breast cancer survivors are doing, but they could literally sit and say, I'm a victim of breast cancer, but they don't. They say, I'm a survivor of breast cancer, because it brings a whole different role that a person walks down when they think like that. And even with our traumas, the same thing. These things, and it is very true that when we connect religion to this Christian perspective, as if you're holding this thought, I never could hold this thought, but I've heard it, that I'm a wretched sinner and I'm not deserving of anything, then you could sometimes, some people take these experiences they are having as something that it's because they're not valuable, or because, this is Yeah, I'm cursed, or this is what God
punished.
has given me. You know, I don't think I've ever even noticed that in the Bible that you're wretched sinner, but you know, to say I am fearfully and wonderfully made is biblical. Why is it that we wouldn't connect to something like that? Or the kingdom of God is within me. Why would we not try to understand what that means a little bit more? So I think that definitely changing the narrative on what we're saying inside is the first step, because you might not even be able to see it in your life yet that you're a survivor, but you are a survivor. If you've come through something and you're still here, you have survived it. You have survived it. And that can definitely take you down a path to different experiences that might just, you can find, not might, that you will find to be more beneficial to your life.
Right. And I think it comes down to is that when you can look at yourself through an empowered perspective rather than the victim's perspective. And when I say, you know, the victim perspective, a victim feels victimized because they don't feel powerful, or they don't feel like they have any control over what's happening, you know. So from the perspective and knowing, you know, again, this was something that was in me on some level. So when I'm talking about these ideas, this is something that I know that I've experienced, either I experienced directly or I've seen it, or, you know, people have talked about it, whatever. But a victim can only hope that the victimizer changes.
Yes, indeed. Yes.
Yeah.
And that is very empowering. There's nothing, you're really at the mercy. You're very vulnerable.
Yeah. And if you have a perspective that you're being cursed or that you're being punished, how do you even consider the idea that, first of all, that the victimizer, which is in this case is God, and you're not even allowed to look at God in a negative way, and that because God is doing it, whatever is happening to you is justified because you're wicked or a wretch or a sinner or whatever. It's like it's a loop that can be so destructive.
Yeah, absolutely. And definitely cannot grow from that. So you're literally living in hell.
Yes, literally. So all of this to me is and I bring a lot of this because I think sometimes, well, I don't think, I know that a lot of times these underlying thoughts that when we're dealing with our trauma, when we're dealing with the issues in our lives, those are that can be a lot of times an underlying loop that is running that we don't even recognize.
We definitely, I think the main script that runs for anyone who's been traumatized in some way, they're not valued enough, they're not good enough. There's definitely this victim mindset in one way or another. Now, it might get expressed in so many different ways, but at the end of the day, the ability to grow in those ways that will be where your life can be more joyous are definitely limited, and you're cut off from that because you're cutting yourself off from that because you're in this place where you're really connected to the pain. And I get it because I have been there. I have definitely been there. But to be able to compare who I am now to who I was then, there are things that I do now that I would never, ever have attempted to because I was in that victim state. And I did definitely allow my power to be more so toward the victimizer, be it who it is, be it if you see it as God, be it if you see it as this person who hurts you, a system, whatever it is, to give something that power. And for me, the creator, I see when we're truly connected to the creator, we are expansive. We're going to grow. We're going to flourish. We wouldn't be constricted and confined. I don't see that because the creator in life is expansive. So we would go with that flow. I think when we've been traumatized, we're cut off from that natural process because we're so caught up in protection of ourselves. We're almost resisting the natural flow of things.
Now, can you? Now, you mentioned, Crystal, that you were, so before you said that there was, you do things now that you would never have never attempted before. What shifted you? And then can you give us an example of how these ideas have empowered you? So what shifted you? What are you doing now that you probably wouldn't have done before?
I would say what shifted me was definitely that as above, so below, as within, so without. There's a whole view of me internally as a self had to shift. And I had to recognize that I am the one who has the power to create in my life. When I was definitely in that victim mindset, it was all up to someone, something, some entity outside of me to give me the okay to be able to do something, to give me the validation to say, okay, these people like me, or this is showing me that I'm good enough, so maybe I'll then go and try and do this thing. Now, don't get me wrong, I was always progressive. I did accomplish things in my life before I came to Kemetic Principles, but it was much at a slower pace, and it was with a lot of anxiety, which is not fun. You know what I mean? It's not fun to achieve things, but always worrying about things, or always second guessing who I was. I think we slow down the natural progression of our life when we are hindered. When we're hindered by our thoughts and we still have this direction we're going in, but it could be hindered where we never reach certain heights in our life because we're fighting in one way or another. So I would say it was first really looking and taking away this need to have external validation to give me the okay to do things in my life. And being able to look inside of me and really connect with who I am, the source that I come from, and let that be the motivating factor to understand that what I see and I choose to see within can be reflected on the outside. So I had to change really from what I was seeing other people see about me. I think what I was doing at first was I was holding inside of me what I thought other people saw about me. But what I had to change is, what are my desires that I would like for me? What do I see? And then what are my desires? And when I started connecting with that emotion of my desires and really loving who the essence of me is, my flow changed. My flow changed. The fear, like there's still fears there. Life is forever. You're continuing to grow. But the weight is definitely lifted, and the courage has definitely been gained, and the excitement has definitely been gained to do these things that I just never thought I could do. I never thought that I could start my own business. I never thought that I could, speak more about what my true feelings are and my true perspectives, that they made a difference. To connect with my family in the ways that I do, in a way that I feel has been more empowering to my children, to see me take chances in life much more than I would have, to not be connected to if I mess up in something, or this idea of messing up, because it's never really messing up, it's learning. But if I do these things, that I'm gonna get results from it. I can do things, and it's not a if I do something and it doesn't work out, it does not mean that something about me personally. It just means, if this has happened now, how can I grow from this? What is the understanding I'm getting from this thing? How can I do this differently? Or maybe this isn't something I want to do. And I think
can I learn from it?
Yes, and it's changed the nature of the relationships I seek. I think I am coming to have relationships that I value more based on who I am now, of loving myself versus being this victim. Because I definitely see that a lot of relationships I had came from this paradigm of me seeing myself as not being good enough. And so it was always echoed in those relationships in one way or another, that I'm not good enough. Now me loving myself and really valuing who I am, seeing my importance and seeing my purpose, I am met with people who complement that.
Yes. And so you said it, and what you just said to me is like, and this is how I put this, just in a more succinct way, is like, when we're operating from a lack of self-esteem, we're looking for people to validate who we are.
Mm-hmm.
When we grow and we become to love who we are, then we get around people who confirm who we are.
Ooh, absolutely. Absolutely. And it could be the same people, some of them could be the
Yes.
same people, and you recognize that the relationship is totally different. It's totally different, you
Yep.
know. And then there are some relationships that kind of trickle off. They just, and not even with necessarily me doing anything to make that effort happen. It's just like they start to fall away. Those
Yep.
relationships that were not edifying to who I am, you know.
Yep.
So,
Yep. No, and that's it. And see, you're talking some deep metaphysical principles there, and I won't go into that, but that is so true. It's like all of a sudden those people were in your life, and then it's like they just disappear. When you change who you are, it's like they're no longer there. It's another dimension.
and you're not even connected to the drama that maybe you were before, the emotion that was attached to it. Yeah. I mean, I literally have lost relationships where I put no effort. I've not even put effort in saying I don't want to deal with them. I've been really just focused on my own spiritual growth, my own growth. And I've seen people outside of me just like, seriously, some people in a rageful state toward me, but I haven't connected with it. And those relationships literally have dissipated without me having to connect to it. It's very interesting when I think about who I was when I was in that victim state. I tried to hold on to a lot of those types of relationships because to me, for some weird reason, it was validating to keep those relationships going in some way, or that I needed to put this effort into it. But I'm recognizing that when you are coming from these principles and that spirit, that it's not, you don't even have to put effort into certain things. It is a natural flow. And so I trust anything that leaves my space now, and I can be trusting of things that enter, keeping in mind that you are always learning. So some relationships that enter your space, you know, you do evaluate them, but you're evaluating them from a different paradigm, you know, and you're handling the situations differently.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that you deal with people in a way that when it's from an empowered perspective, you're not as suspicious. You're not as, just expecting the worst, doesn't mean that it doesn't happen.
Right.
But you don't immediately from Jump Street assume the worst of a human being. And then, you got your defenses up,
Right. You're more
like
open.
You said,
more open.
Yeah. You evaluate the relationship, and if you figure out if that person or whatever is toxic to you, then you make a decision about the relationship.
Without the emotional hangups.
Yes. But you don't worry about, is this person trying to do this? Is this person? No, it's like, hey, I'm going to take you at face value till you show me something different.
And I will also say another thing, when a lot of times when you're coming from these hurt places, I'll say this for me, and I know this is true for many people. You can come from a place where everything hurts you. Everything hurts your feelings. You know what I mean? You're kind of super sensitive to the way a person said a phrase. Or they said it with this tone, so it meant, it made me feel this certain way. And I noticed for myself, and it also prevented me from saying things a certain way. I was always kind of in my mind on how to say something so that someone wouldn't be offended or someone didn't say something the wrong way, and I've learned that, I'm just going to say it from my heart, my spirit. And when they say something to me, oh, they just said this. I don't need to take this sentence and go analyze it for 20 minutes. You know what I mean? To make it mean something that confirms some type of lack of who I am, so it's definitely a lighter way of a life experience.
Yeah. A lighter way of being, man.
Mm-hmm.
For real. So Crystal, so we're getting ready to wrap up here. Tell us about Mentally Magnificent. So I know you're going to have a circle on the new KCL platform. How are you going to be helping people on the platform, and how can they connect with you just even outside that platform?
Okay, yeah. So in the platform with Mentally Magnificent, my goal is to definitely bring awareness to a lot of aspects of trauma. Because again, I think a lot of times, often we don't even recognize that we are having these experiences. We know that something in our lives is not meeting the mark. You know that you're having these limitations in your life and you're not experiencing your life the way that you want to the degree that you would want. So a lot of what I talk about is awareness on how trauma shows up for you. But in addition to that, it is things to consider based off Kemetic principles to expand how how you are looking at situations. I will have courses that I offer that can take a person down a road of self-discovery in terms of especially the mind, because I think it's really all mental when it comes to this trauma. It's all about the story that we have told ourselves in our mind. And so, yeah, so the Kemetic principles are helping to deal with that, deal with the thinking, deal with how we're allowing our mind to use us, and for us to flip that and use our mind as a tool that gives us what it is that we want in life. So a lot of courses that I'll create will be based on that. And so in the circle, it's the awareness, and then beyond the awareness, it's the broader perspective to consider and to apply to your life. Outside of the circle, there will be courses that I offer, and then people can find me at mentallyMagnificent.com. That's where I do have a blog that I write about, and I will put more information there on other things that I offer. I have a YouTube station, also Mentally Magnificent, where I'll talk more about trauma and applying Kemetic principles to the healing process of that, as well as other remedies or other approaches, holistic approaches to consider. And then I'm also on Instagram at Mentally Magnificent. I have a Facebook group, Mentally Magnificent. Everything across the board is Mentally Magnificent.
So they can find you at Mentally Magnificent somewhere.
Yes.
Gotcha. Now, don't you have a challenge or something coming up here soon?
Yes, starting January 9th, from the 16th, it'll be a 7-day Overcoming Anxiety Detox Challenge. So we will do a detox with food, but in there, we'll also talk about some mindset aspects to consider when you're really at this point of dealing with anxiety, addressing anxiety. The challenge is not to say that you're going to have anxiety eradicated in 7 days, but what it is saying is that you're facing in the direction, you're noticing something, you're feeling something within your space that has impacted you enough to say, I want to know more about going down this path and helping myself, being this healer of myself. How much can I give to myself and do for myself to be able to see a difference? So it really is being this scientist of yourself, studying you and all the different ways, mind, body, and spirit, that we are not taught about approaching our mental health with. We're not really taught much about our mental health and how to manage it, but definitely not these organic ways of approaching your mental health, mind, body, and spirit. We're taught to really look outside of ourselves for all the answers, be it through the therapy, be it through the medicine. And I'm not saying that maybe for some people that's not appropriate, what they want, or if that's what they desire, I respect that. But my question always comes, what are the basic things that we could be doing, applying, that might help balance us more, that might show a shift? So the detox challenge is definitely about facing in a direction that takes you down a path of self-discovery.
Gotcha. Now, what's the website to that challenge?
That's www.overcominganxiety 7-day detox challenge.
Awesome. All right. Well, Crystal Turner, this has been like an amazing time. Definitely appreciate your input and your perspective on this. And you're coming from a professional perspective, as well as from your spiritual perspective and personal experience. So to me, that is such a powerful combination. So I know that you're going to help many. And guys, y'all are dealing with the trauma and the mental health aspect. This is a lady that you can talk with, and this is a lady that you can come to that she can definitely help. So y'all get ready. But at any rate, do you have any words of wisdom to impart as we leave here, Crystal?
I would just say we're at the start of a new year. And again, I know that you can start at any point in any day of your life that you decide, but I would just encourage, what has been most helpful for me is when I started on a path of learning myself, it's become the most interesting subject I could study is me. It's the most interesting subject. And if you connect with yourself and the more you get to love yourself, the more that you will find that interest within learning who you are. And that will open up a whole new world.
Awesome. Awesome. Beautiful. All right. Well, thank you, Crystal. And we will be seeing you on the inside.
Yes, indeed. Thank you for having me, Reginald.
That.
All right.